You said in 3 years, anything you can imagine, you'll be able to generate using AI, and it will be indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah, I made a reel on this and it went like super viral on Twitter and Instagram and all that. And I kind of like brought a lot of a light to this. But yeah, Varun, you know, he's got maybe 600,000 on Instagram and he's got a big following on YouTube. And he no longer is even part of the process of creating his reels. You know, he's got a team, they use his AI clone. So like I was talking to Varun, he's like, yeah, I mean like some weeks I won't even log in Instagram and I'll have 12 posts up with 25 million views. That got me like 13 leads for his many businesses. And like it's insane, right? And so right now, I think for the next 12 to 16 months, there's gonna be a big arbitrage opportunity. A lot of people are gonna hop on this. And you're gonna see people who built massive audiences without even, they're not recording anything, they're not in front of the camera, they're just out working on the rest of their business while this thing is sort of like on cruise control.
Okay, today's guest is Roberto Nixon. And let me start by saying this. Roberto makes some of the best short form content that I've ever seen. And that's a big proclamation because I've seen a lot of short form creators. But I told him that when he walked in, and I could not believe it that he's only been a full-time creator for 2 years. And in that short amount of time, he's gotten over 780,000 followers. He even went on a crazy run where he gained 400,000 followers in just 100 days. And so, of course, we got into all of that and we broke down exactly how he went from 0 to 400,000 followers in 100 days. And there's even one point in the episode where Roberto shares a huge arbitrage opportunity that you can capitalize on in the next 12 months and produce viral content without even recording. It sounds insane, but there's people that are already doing it. So anyway, I'm not going to say anything more. You're listening to The Callum Johnson Show. Let's get into it.
I was on your Instagram this morning, scrolling through some of your posts, reading some of your captions. And there was something I read and I wanted to say it back to you and get your reaction to it. So you go, just under 2 years ago, I started making videos for the internet.
Yeah.
They were terrible at best, but I fell in love with the process. Obsessed over how to improve, little by little, day by day. Fast forward to last week, I made the short film for Orion that closed Zuck's keynote at Connect. Please start that thing you've been wanting to start today and just keep at it. Good things will happen. And so here's where I want to begin. For those that may not know, how do you end up producing a short film for Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Meta, Facebook, obviously, and what is Orion?
Yeah. Dude, that was the coolest honor of my life. And I say it because when I first was presented with the opportunity, I was like, well, this is kind of novel because I'm like 2 years in making videos on the internet. And when I say making videos, it's like short form reels, 30 to 45 seconds. A lot of it is just like news coverage of what's going on. It's nothing like too special or out there. Like the more cinematic stuff just came about in the last like few months. So I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be my first ever film. And this is going to premiere in front of a massive audience, thousands of, you know, the most influential people in tech, and then millions of people watching it, you know, from home on stream or after the fact. I'm like, this kind of is like a pretty big deal for my first film, right? And so I knew I had to like go super hard at it. And basically what it is, to give some context, Meta just launched Orion, which is like, to me, I think it's Zuckerberg's iPhone moment. If you look back to 2007 when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, everybody remembers the line. It's like when he says, every once in a while, a product comes along that changes everything. And like that's a historic line by Steve Jobs. So I feel like Zuckerberg launching Orion could be that, because what it is AR-enabled smart glasses. And Meta's big bet, and a lot of big bets around the tech industry, and people are talking about it, is like the next computing paradigm, the next great computing platform is glasses, right? Like right now, we may look back in 30 years and be like, you remember when we were all just like zombies looking down at a glowing rectangle and like we weren't even present with the world? So a lot of people think the same way that phones took away some of that light computing from computers, you know, like we used to be on our computers, now we do a lot of stuff with our phones, but phones didn't necessarily replace computers. The same will happen with the smart glasses, where we're going to do a lot more of our computing, whether it be messages, whether it be games, whether it be like light scrolling, whatever it may be. It'll be done in the glasses. The phone will use a little bit less, but they still won't replace the phones. And so like Meta desperately needs to own the hardware layer, You know, as they've noticed, like Apple takes 30%, Google takes 30% of the native app platforms. And so that's their big bet. And they finally launched it to the world after 10 years working on it. And they tapped me to make the trailer for it to introduce it to the world, which is really, really special. And if I may say one more thing about that, the reason that they chose me, and like we can go into this later, but I have like two buckets when it comes to my content. One is like the business side. It's the monetizable stuff. It's the scalable side, which is like the split screen, you know, like news, talking about what's going on in the tech world, reviewing products, whatever it may be. A lot of brands, they really want to tap into that format. But the other side of it was like just for me, like my like the artist inside of me sometimes just wants to make things for the creative challenge. And I'm like, well, that's not very monetizable. This is really actually just for me. But Meta chose me because of those videos that I thought were not monetizable. That's happened a couple times before in recent months. So it's like the thing that has actually made me the most money is the stuff that I thought wouldn't make me money. And it was just purely for the artistic endeavor. So I thought that was really interesting as well. But in a nutshell, that was the trailer. And we worked on it for 6 weeks, like blood, sweat, and tears every second of every day, just thinking about it. Because it came to me like pretty late, August 19th. So we had like a month to put it together. But I'm really happy with the way it turned out. The reception was great. And the thing I'm really proud of is when you're looking at the stock price, it pumped most during that video.
That's crazy.
So like I was really happy about that. And I think it was a mission accomplished.
Yeah, you know, I encourage people to watch it because it's a great video. You know what? You said a big statement. You said that it could be Mark Zuckerberg's almost like Steve Jobs iPhone moment. One of the things that's interesting, I learned about this recently. There was an iPhone before the iPhone. Apple didn't make it, but there was like a smartphone. There was like an iteration of like a touchscreen phone. I think it was like two guys in the West Coast.
Was it like Palm OS maybe?
Yeah.
That might have been I think that was still physical keyboard.
Yeah. There was someone that had made a touchscreen phone before the iPhone, but it just never caught.
Huh.
And so I'm curious for you, like how close do you think we are to this AR reality? Like could Orion almost be like, I don't know, in the iPhone's case, that earlier version of the smartphone that was made by another company was like 5-10 years too early.
Right, exactly.
Do you think that could be the case with Orion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, I think it's the closest thing we have to Jarvis, right? You know, like the famous, like Tony Stark's robot sort of assistant. I think, like if it was available to buy today, I think I could take it out and it could already, like I could go run errands and not bring my phone. I think that's important to me. You know, because you can take calls on it, you can message on it, you can do a lot of the light computing stuff that we rely on our phones for without the potential of maybe getting sucked in for 2 hours watching YouTube or Candy Crush or TikTok or whatever it may be. And I like that. I think that's I think that's a future that we want to get towards. And it's funny too, because I should preface, I don't say this because I'm a pretty close partner of Meta now and we have a great relationship, but I've been saying this long before Meta even knew I existed. Right. And so like I've been pretty consistent with my content throughout like the last few years. I do think it's where we're headed towards. And I had another note on that. Oh yeah, the other reason why it's like one of the crazy novel things was this EMG band. So it's called electromyography. And the way that it works is you just wear a band and it detects the brain signals coming down your arms. And I was like, this is incredible, man. It's like the first time I was doing some of these gestures, like this was scroll up, scroll to the left, and you felt the haptics, even though they're coming from a wrist, you felt it at the finger level. And it was really easy to control where, you know, like it's nothing new. Like the Vision Pro had it as well. Quest 3 has it where you're actually tracking with your eyes, but then it's looking at your fingers and you can, like the click in essence is the finger tap, right? Or the double index tap or the double middle finger tap. Like there's a bunch of gestures involved. But usually has to be within the field of view because it's eye tracking. This, because it's EMG, like I could literally have my hands on the couch behind me in my pocket and I'm interfacing with the world around me. And like that was the first I've ever tried of its kind. Like that was the real kind of holy shit moment when I was trying Orion. I was like, whoa, I thought I've tried it all. I've never, like that was really interesting. And so that's the moment that I realized, yeah, this could be it, man, for like light computing. Like I'm walking down the street, Callum texts me and just with a swipe of a finger, boom, just texted you back without having to pull out the phone, unlock it, open up the app. And so I'm like, okay, there's something here. Timing wise, I would think like 2030s for sure, but even a little bit before, like 2028, 2029, think these will start coming out mass production. People will start adopting them. I don't think it'll be too rapid, but eventually I think there's going to be a Pokemon Go moment where there's going to be just this killer AR app in the present world where everybody goes and rushes to buy these. And I'm saying this now because I would love to listen to this podcast 5 years from the future and see if I was right.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something there, man. And that's why I think like when people call it Zuckerberg's iPhone moment, I feel like there's some credence to that.
Yeah. No, that's so cool. I want to switch over to AI because I know you talk about that as well. And I want to read out a quote that you said. I heard you say this in an interview, I believe at VaynerX when you were there. You said, in 3 years, anything you can imagine, you'll be able to generate using AI, and it will be indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
Everyone with a phone in 3 seconds will be able to generate anything they can imagine. Can you can you elaborate on that? Can you explain what you meant?
A little creepy, right? A little dystopian. No, man, I mean, I think we're almost even to that point. The only reason I don't call it indistinguishable yet is because most tech-savvy people or anybody with a trained eye now can sort of tell. Like, the scary part is you've probably been on Facebook. Like, you scroll your Facebook feed, there's a lot of boomers out there falling for stuff that's obviously AI. But the stuff that's very near indistinguishable to reality right now, you and I would still be able to tell. Like, we'd zoom in and we see like some text or some irregularities or some artifacting or whatever, and we'll say, okay, that's AI. But right now, today and age, like you have a lot of data on the internet. You have photos, you have audio. I can make a video of you doing pretty much whatever I can imagine, and it's going to look pretty damn realistic to the point where 93% of the public is going to be fooled. And like, that's a scary proposition, right? And so that's the reason I started talking about AI. Knowledge is power. We got to equip people with this knowledge so it reduces the ability for it to be used maliciously. But that's now, we can fool 93% of the public. I think in 3 more years, even much earlier, it's going to get to the point where it's like 99.98% of the public will be fooled by this stuff. It's going to be so unbelievably, like, we're way past uncanny valley now, and this is just like, it looks pretty damn real. Like, so everybody's got to just study up and know that this stuff is possible.
You know what's funny? So we had someone on the show last week. His name is Zeta, produces a lot of content using AI on Instagram. And he was telling me about this guy, Varun Maya. Who makes and he sent me his page and he was like, this is all the videos are AI or something. Or like, he uses AI a lot to make his videos. I was like, this looks completely real.
Yeah. He may have got it because I made a reel on this and it went like super viral on Twitter and Instagram and all that. And I kind of like brought a lot of light to this. But yeah, Varun, he's got maybe 600,000 on Instagram, and he's got a big following on YouTube. And he's like one of the biggest tech creators in India. And he no longer is even part of the process of creating his reels. He's got a team. They use his AI clone and they just feed it a script. He reads it out, complete perfect lip syncing and dubbing in his voice, in his mannerisms. His AI clone reads it out, and then his team like does like a lot of the editing, the polishing. They'll do the caption, the distribution, the cover, whatever, and just get it out there. So like, I was talking to Varun, and he's like, yeah, I mean, like, some weeks I won't even log in Instagram, and I'll have 12 posts up with 25 million views. That got me like 13 leads for his many businesses. And like, it's insane, right? And so like, eventually this will it'll be so commoditized that it may not hit, right? But right now there's a massive arbitrage opportunity for people, maybe like yourself, who are like really busy doing the pod, but you want to get your reels popping. You don't even have to do any work anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so right now, I think for the next 12 to 16 months, there's going to be a big arbitrage opportunity. A lot of people are going to hop on this. And you're going to see people who build massive audiences without they're not recording anything. They're not in front of the camera. They're just out working on the rest of their business while this thing is sort of like on cruise control. And it's a big paradigm shift.
Is there like, that is crazy. It's kind of scary to think about with how much shit I've said, like how much of me is on the internet.
Kind of annoying too. Like the artist side of me, like even though I cover this and I use all these tools, like the artist side of me that really values the human touch and creativity, like I see why artists hate AI so much, because like the artist half of me is like, that shit's annoying. Like this sucks, but
just as I got it going.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? So the technology that even like a Varun is using, because the arbitrage opportunity that you speak to is interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's people listening that are like intrigued by it. Is the software or like the AI almost avatar that's being created, is that something that is like unique to him, or that's just like a general piece of
Well,
software
it's
that
unique
anyone
to him
could
because
access?
it's trained on him.
Okay.
But if you have any data on the internet, like I can go home and in 20 minutes I can get a pretty good AI model of you just because of all the data you have on the internet. I might do that. No. But you know what you do is like Varun sits down and he'll be in the outfit that he wants with the background of choice, and he'll sit and he'll read like a 4-minute plate, and then he'll feed that into the AI and it'll produce a model based on those 4 minutes. And right now it's very like it's going to take what you wear, how you look, your appearance, how you talk. But very soon it's already starting to happen. Like you'll be able to take that model. Okay, I don't want to re-record another one. So you'll be able to change his clothes, change his background. You'll be able to age it up and down slightly even. Like say you're using the same model for 5 years, you age a little bit. You can actually age it up. I mean, like they've introduced some of these companies, HeyGen being one, they've introduced motion avatars now. So instead of just talking head, you're actually like walking and doing things, and it's an AI model. Instagram just launched one that I want to show you because I'm one of the first participants. They just showed it at Connect, where I actually have a AI model. We went out to a studio in Culver City, and like it was a whole big production process for Instagram. But I don't know if mine's active yet or if they're going to release it soon or whatever. But you can FaceTime with me on Instagram. And dude, if you didn't know it was AI, like you may not, like it's pretty incredible. Like maybe you'll want like a clip for this pod, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's now. So you think about in 2030, everybody's going to have an AI clone, digital assistant, to offload as much as you want to them. Like they could just be your general QA guy, your customer service guy, or you could send them to Zooms to act as you if you wanted. Like
Yeah.
it's people don't realize this is happening, man. The world is changing very, very fast.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
You know what? You're someone that's so plugged into this, so I think you're the right person to ask. I think there's a lot of these conversations going around, and you even mentioned dystopian. It's kind of dystopian.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these conversations around AI happening, of it like almost kind of painting an apocalyptic picture
Right. Yeah.
of like what it could do to society, what it could mean for humanity. I'm curious, what do you think is your perspective, opinion on what the effect is on society
Sure.
and like how we live our lives? Because even some of the things that I'm hearing around, you explained that someone could copy me in like a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
Or like even in dating, I've heard that they could, we're not even dating like real humans, you're just dating like, I don't know, some AI thing. Like what is, in terms of its effect on humanity and how we live our lives, do you think our lives improve or get worse over the long term?
Okay, quick break. Are you tired of scrolling endlessly on TikTok? I know I am. Well, what if your TikTok habit was actually making you money? So a few months ago, we had an entrepreneur called Rob Oliver come on the show and break down how there's 20-year-old kids right now that are making thousands of dollars a month as an affiliate on TikTok Shop. Now, so many of you were interested in that episode, and we got such a positive response that we wanted to bring you even more practical advice from Rob on how you can get started. Introducing our friends at Your First Dollar. Your First Dollar is a community that teaches you how to make $10,000 a month in profit as a TikTok Shop affiliate. Right now, they've got hundreds of members that have gone from complete e-commerce newbies. I'm talking about they've never made a single dollar online to earning $10,000 a month on TikTok Shop. And when you join Your First Dollar, you don't just get pre-recorded lessons. You also get access to top coaches, daily live calls, and a supportive community. And the best part is that you can complete everything right from your phone or your laptop. So if you're ready to get started on TikTok Shop and learn how to become a top affiliate, go to the link in the description, join Your First Dollar today. Trust me, your future self will thank you. Now back to the show.
So the thing with tech, if you look at sort of the history of technology, right? It's like you can make the case that any technological paradigm shift, you can make the case that it's positive. You can make the case that it's negative. I mean, computing is at any level of computing. Social media is another one. I love social media because it's given me all the opportunities in the world, and it's fit my skill sets, and it's just like created such a great life for me. And I get to sit, down with people as yourself, and it's like, but other people may make the case that it's caused addiction and it's ruined, it's mental health. There's a huge crisis, and the way that I sort of approach this, and it may be a little naive, but when it comes to AI tech, I'm like, this is happening. History shows that resisting technological advancement has always been futile. It's kind of like an adapt or die situation if you have any sort of economic ambition. And it's very much going to happen. People think it can be regulated away. That's impossible. People think you can, there's no stopping it. It's 100% happening. And so my thesis has always been, well, let's adapt to it. Let's figure out ways how to adapt. Let's figure out ways how to leverage it, incorporate it into our tech stack, and then educate the audience on how to do it as well. I'm doing all this research anyways. Let me make some content helping other people out as well. It's also twofold. Like on the content side, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's like the knowledge is really, really powerful when it comes to this stuff. So the more people understand the progress, where it's headed, what's happening, the less it can be used, again, when used nefariously. Because a lot of people will use it for sinister purposes. A lot of people are going to use it to increase their efficiency and productivity. And maybe, there's a lot of artists out there that can now create things that maybe they couldn't create before because they didn't have the equipment or the know-how, and AI allows them to do this. And so where I come from it, I'm sort of a tech optimist, and I'm like, well, let's figure out ways to use this in a positive way, versus sort of the mainstream media's initiative where it's like, let's focus on all the negative and all the crazy shit that they're all like, this is Terminator, this is Skynet, this is whatever it may be. And I'm like, well, that's what generates clicks. Let's try to figure out how to generate clicks and build awareness and affinity through like all the positives that this could bring. So that's where I kind of stand. I definitely can see like a lot of these AI use cases. I'm like, there are not a lot of positive use cases. Like 98% of this is going to be used maliciously. And I can kind of see that, but at least if I'm educating the audience, and they're telling their grandparents about it, and they're telling their parents and their cousins, and they're sharing it with other people in their life, it's like now those people are a little bit more immune to being scammed, like with an AI voice of a relative calling them, if that makes sense. And so I guess in summary, it's like, I'm a tech optimist. This is happening no matter what. We have to learn to adapt. Resistance is futile. So how can we be part of like the optimism brigade and trying to like figure out what can we extract from this tech that'll actually help us versus hurt us? So hope that makes a little bit of sense, but that's kind of my position when it comes to AI.
Yeah. I think to your point, at the end of the day, it's like with a lot of this stuff, and I think it's the same with social media, at the end of the day, it's not really the tool or like the thing. It's we're just humans.
Right.
So whenever you involve humans, there's good things and there's bad things. And one of the things that you mentioned is that in the next like 12 to 18 months, there's like a huge arbitrage opportunity using AI, specifically with content creation. And so we're going to get into that later because you were even telling me.
I mean, dude, I could talk about this for 12 hours. So it's like,
we're going to
be careful if you open up the...
We'll be here a long time. But we're going to get into it later, how someone can build a following on Instagram. You're like an expert at that. You're so good at it. And then they can also use AI in that. But before we do, I want to cover your story.
Let's do it, man.
Because your story is a special one. And I was reading a tweet that you had put out. And so I want to read parts of it back to you and we can just follow the thread. So you say this, let me tell you a story. When I graduated college, no one would hire me. I sent out 500 resumes, crickets. So I decided to spend 12 hours a day, every day for 2 years, mum's basement, studying, researching, tinkering, trying, YouTube University, learning building, learning failing, learning shipping. Eventually I built some apps I was really happy with. Reached out to every tech journalist for coverage, crickets. No money for marketing. So I learned social media and content. Built up a network of pages with over 10 million followers to leverage as my own distribution channel. And it worked. Millions of dollars in revenue, sold for millions. I went from praying for a $40,000 a year job to building something for myself. No handouts. I've never had to rely on a paycheck from someone else. And so there's more, but we're going to get into it.
Long tweet.
It was a long tweet, but it's good. I want to start right in the beginning. When I graduated college, no one would hire me. I sent out 500 resumes.
Yeah.
Crickets.
Yeah.
Can you just take us back in time for a second? What was kind of Roberto at that point in time, if I wanted to understand who you were as a person?
Yeah, so like the 20-second sort of summary up until college. So like high school, man, like my whole life, I was like a pretty good student. I would say like above average intelligence, all that. And then I got kind of into the wrong crowd in high school. And I remember like, then I discovered like Eminem and Tupac and those guys, man. I was just like, probably a bad influence on me. And I just started like, I feel like I became somebody that I wasn't. And then all of a sudden, like junior, senior year, man, my grades just plummeted. I wasn't able to get into any school. I was like applying left and right. I mean, I got into a few like something called like Radford and Longwood and VA because I come from like DC. They accepted me, but no shade to those schools. I was like, I ain't going there. Let me just go to community college. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went to a school for music business actually called Full Sail. My dad lives in Nigeria, or lived in Nigeria. Well, he still does. But at the time, he went there with the World Bank, and they were able to like pay for my whole school. And so I had like that super privilege and luxury to be able to go there. I didn't learn anything there though. I just became like party man. So I finally graduated from there, and yeah, man, I couldn't find a job. I just could not find a job. And I moved back in with my mom, and I was in her basement for like 5 years just bumming it. Or at least to the outside person, it may have looked like I was bumming it, but I was in there grinding and I was learning. Like one of the things that I mentioned in your conversation is like I'm like one day I would love to be able to give back to the people who didn't have my luxury of like having a place to live and food on the table. Like I would say if I had to go and make ends meet and, you know, work at On the Border or like Chili's, which I actually did for a couple of years, but like if I had to do that to make ends meet, I wouldn't have the time to learn everything that I learned in that period. So in that period, I learned how to code, I learned how to design, I learned digital marketing. I was just in there. I learned and still now, like every program in the Adobe Creative Suite, I feel like it's a third arm. Like I know everything, every hotkey, like it's just an extension of me now, you know? And it was those 5 years that I attributed to like learning everything. But yeah, man, like 21, 22 to like 26, 27, I was just a complete bum. While all of my friends, you know, they went to UVA, Georgetown, Virginia Tech, JMU, all the good schools in the area. And they were all working for the big four accounting firms, you know, climbing their way up the ladder. They had the BMW 3 Series. They had this, that. And I was just like, you know, this kid who was like cool in high school. And now I'm just like a complete bum. And that chip on the shoulder still like exists in me today, which is funny, we can talk about that later, but I think all struggle is actually a blessing in disguise because during struggle makes the man. You learn the most during the down seasons. So even in high seasons, sometimes I find myself like weirdly nostalgic for the down season, but we'll get into that later. And so, yeah, then at 27, I had, at 25, 26, I was building a web design company, fledgling. I mean, like my clients were like small dentists and realtors, and it was peanuts, man. You know what I mean? It was enough to like get by, but it was not anything significant. But then me and one of my partners at the time, Chris Webb, shout out Chris Webb, wherever you are, I haven't talked to him in a long time. We decided to build mobile apps. And like there was this rush in the App Store. This was like 2013. And our first app was a weather app. Cut me if I'm going on too much of a rant here.
Go for it.
But I was also big on Instagram at the time when it first had come out. And with this weather app, I went, and I'll tell the story. I don't know if she's comfortable with it or not, but there was this influencer named Negan Mirsaheli, one of the biggest influencers on Instagram at the time. Not even that term didn't even exist. She was just like a fashion girl who was posting her fits on Instagram. She had 1 million followers, which today is probably like 30 million. And I go up to her and I'm like, hey, how much would it cost to promote my weather app? This was 2012 actually. She's like, oh, I don't know, like $200, would that be? $200, holy shit. And so I ran an ad with her. And the weather app went #1 in the App Store.
That's crazy.
And I was like, okay, so this was before this was like the birth of influencer marketing. I feel like I was part of that pioneering of it. And I went to every single page with any sort of following on the internet, meme pages, whatever it may be. There was another one by this girl named Rachel. If you're out there, shout out to you. She had a page called Best Scenes. It was like movie scenes, and had like 2 million followers at the time. And I was just like running ads through her, and she was charging like $7. And I was getting installs on the penny. Like, I mean, like probably a penny for 10 installs. It's like, which now you have to pay like $3, $4, $5 to get an install, right? And so I was like, okay, what do we build for this shift right here? So then we built an app called PicLab, and it was the dumbest app, man. It was like literally like you put shapes over your photos, like you could put a star overlay over your photos and put text on your photos. There was nothing like that on the App Store. And we just went through this meme page route, and we were running ad after ad, and it became the most downloaded app on the planet in 2014. Most downloaded photo editor, not including like Instagram, but like pure photo editor. Yeah, man. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, I went from zero being a bum to making like a couple $1 million like profit in 1 year. And then I blew through it all like an idiot. And we'll talk about, now I know why like rappers and ball players go broke, because I was like, oh, I have money. But yeah, man, so that was like kind of the birth of influencer marketing there too. And like all these pages and influencers didn't realize that the power that they wielded. So that was the craziest arbitrage opportunity I've ever seen in my professional career since. Unfortunately, subscriptions weren't even active yet in the App Store. So it was all 99-cent in-app purchases. Otherwise, I may have been like set for life, man. But that was a really wild time. And the rest is, I've always been entrepreneurial since. And so I've never really, since I was like 24, taken a paycheck. And I'm really proud of that. And it hasn't always been great. No, there's been peaks, there's been valleys, there's been years I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars and been like stressed out of my mind. But I am proud of the fact that I've always just made it happen on my own, back against the ropes. I had to fight out, I had to climb out of there. And that's something that's really cool. And so now in my content, I try to package all of that up. I feel like I've made so many mistakes and wasted decade plus. It's like, let me try to help other people. Like, I see myself in a lot of like these young up and comers, and I'm like, I feel like I could be of value to them, whether it be mentorship or whatever it could be. So a lot of my storytelling content revolves around that, if that makes sense. So,
I
don't know if I missed anything, but
I know I want to get deeper into it. And one of the things you mentioned is that you said you went to like almost like a music college, right?
Yeah.
And you said you were like the party guy.
Yeah, and shout out Full Sail Orlando, Whisper Park, man. We can go through that whole. My ex roommate, he's still a DJ Nova. We got in some trouble, man. But yeah, we partied a lot.
And I guess I'm curious for you to reflect on that period of your life.
Yeah.
Let's just say like I was a fly on the wall, maybe just on like a typical weekend. I don't know, Friday night, Saturday night. What would I have seen you doing? Like, who was Roberto at that time? Like, take me behind the scenes.
Dude, man, I was just lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I think a lot of that was just, there's also another side of the story that I'd love to tell. Something else that was going on. But yeah, I didn't know who I was, so I drowned that out with a lot of partying and alcohol. Like, you want to get specifics, like Friday night, we were living in Winter Park, which is where the school was. And there was like UCF was there in Rollins and a lot of big universities. We go to these bars. There was one called like Knights Library. It's the UFC Knights. I was just like there every weekend, just again, man, just bumming it, just drinking cheap beer. And I don't like that period of time is a little bit, it's like my brain almost like deleted it. It all feels like just one giant, I don't know if you've ever had this in the past, but it just feels like one giant blur. And I just remember just being depressed and anxious. And I'll tell this story because I never really told it publicly. But when I was 18, like I used to like smoke weed here and there with my friends. And one day at this party, I think I smoked something that was laced. I don't know what it was laced with, man, but I was high for 36 hours. I went into like this cosmic voyage where I thought I was dead. First of all, I thought I died. And I was like riding this canoe in space and all my memories were projected onto the ceiling. And I tell this story now to people and they're like, oh, I know what that was. That was PCP. Or yeah, that was whatever.
Yeah.
But that kind of like destroyed me for a decade, man. It turned into like a severe anxiety disorder, agoraphobia, DPDR, bro, in and out of therapy. I tried a bunch of pills. Eventually, like, I don't even want to say the medicine because I don't know if it was placebo or not. But it was Zoloft. And I feel like that helped me. Could have been placebo. Anyways, that was a whole journey, 10 years. But that was the other thing, was like this underlying severe anxiety disorder. And yeah, man, I just feel like those 8 years are just kind of lost, like almost like they don't exist. Like it was a very tough time, man, and it's hard for me to even like talk about because I start, even though it's gone, like the panic almost like starts setting it again because it was so strong and severe at that time. But I do feel like a lot of young men especially have like similar journeys that they're living right now. So like it's very important to me to be, if I can, of help to anybody. And like anybody watching this, always feel free to DM me, especially if you're going through something similar, because I promise you I can relate. Yeah, it's just a very tough 20s, man. I was like, I knew I was ambitious like deep down, but I was like, like a useless idiot. That's how I felt, man. I just felt like everything I did was no good, and I definitely would hear the murmurs amongst my friend group, like basically like he's just a fucking loser. He's a nobody, and that's always kind of stuck with me and still motivates me. I think up until this day. But yeah, that was a weird decade, man. The lowest of the lows, and then like weirdly, like uncommon highs. And when the high did come, I didn't know how to manage it, right? Because I was like so insecure. I was like, let me go buy this Audi R8 and the penthouse and all this shit to prove to everybody that I'm not this moron loser kind of thing. But yeah, if there's any specifics you want to get into, but that's sort of like the summary, the crux.
Yeah. You know what? I think you're right. I think there's someone that is listening and being able to hear that story and see how it ended and what you're doing now would be more than just comforting. It's almost like it's inspiring. And so one of the things I was thinking as you were speaking, I think when we start heavily drinking, or maybe it's drug use, whatever, even recreationally, I think to a certain extent there's always a form of escapism there.
Oh man, of course.
Of trying to numb some sort of pain.
Modern Warfare 2 in 2009, whenever that was big escapism.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, man.
And so in that period of your life, what was it that you were trying to escape from?
Just this idea, like, damn, like I'm a nobody, I'm a loser, like I fucked up, like it's kind of over, And it's funny because, dude, like I'm pushing 40 now, and I feel as young as I've ever felt. Versus when I was 25, I thought a 35-year-old man was like decrepit, like, well, that dude's dying tomorrow, like it's over for him, right? And so like, and I know a lot of people are gonna relate. Like people in their 20s, for whatever reason, they look at themselves and they say, "Damn, I'm getting old. I'm 27." And like, if you go 10 years into the past, you're going to realize how foolish you sound at this moment, if that is you, because you don't realize how young you are. And so like, it was like this double the stress and the pressure, because I'm like, shit, I'm 26 now, I'm 27 now, like it's over. It's kind of, I'm cooked. And that's what I was running away from. It's just like, well, let me escape into video games. Let me escape into alcohol. Let me escape into TV, whatever it was, into chasing girls, because it distracted me from any real thought, And man, I see that today more than ever now too, mostly with the scrolling and the TV and the Netflix. It's like, that's just people numbing their brain to not have any real thought enter it. And I think that's what it was for me, man. I literally, I was distracted every second of every day. I did not want to think a thought because every thought was uncomfortable. And so like, I lived in this state of like consistent numbness, and all these vices and all this other stuff was just that, man. It was escapism, So
it's kind of crazy. I think as humans, we all go through this to differing degrees, especially in a world like today where there's so much distraction. There's so much like easy dopamine. It's so. Have you ever had that thing even when like sometimes you'll grab your phone, you'll open it,
like,
and you won't remember why? Yeah, it's just like
Orion, bro. That's part of the reason that they're building that. But yeah, 100%.
And it's like this thing. It's even scary to think about. Of like, you just don't want to hear your own thoughts. Like, imagine a reality where you're trying to escape from yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
Crazy to think about. And I think we all kind of go through periods of like, sometimes we feel lost and then we feel good again. We feel confident. It feels like it's going in the right direction. Yeah. Lost again. But I think for people, it's to differing degrees. The extremes, the peaks and the valleys are distinct. They're different. When you reflect on it as Roberto at 40 years old, is there a moment?
Well, I'm not quite there yet. That still sounds a little weird. Hold on, give me something now. Yeah.
When you reflect on it, Roberto, what, 39? 39 years old. When you reflect on that period of your life in your 20s, is there an experience, an event, a moment, which in your head, it's like, that was the pinnacle of me feeling lost, of just being disillusioned? What comes to mind when I say that?
I would say, man, when I made all that money, because it's funny when and this isn't like, I think life is just a collection of seasons. It's ups and downs, it's peaks and valleys. Anybody listening, if you're on a high, you haven't experienced the high of the high yet, right? You haven't experienced the top of that peak. If you're on a low, you haven't experienced the worst that's yet to come. I'm sorry to tell you, right? But like once you experience life and once you get a little bit older, you realize like it really is about the seasons, and like you don't learn much during the highs. You only really learn to appreciate them because you've been through the lows. But like all of the growth comes from your lows, comes from your struggles. And so like anybody listen, if you're in a low season, I know it sounds foreign now and it sounds impossible, but try to enjoy it as much as possible. Because in this time is like you really developing resilience and you're really learning about yourself. And like you'll always be almost, like I said, a little bit nostalgic and sort of not whimsical, sort of like wistful about this time. And yeah, when I finally got out of that low season and I thought everything was rolling because I had money, and then you realize like money doesn't really, it just sort of exposes who you are. That's when I became really depressed because I realized like, okay, all these like girls that I'm attracting with this dope car and apartment and watches and luxury trips and all over the world and shit, it's like, nah, that's the girl that I want, not the girl that I need. And so like another thing you realize is like a lot of the things you attract when you're up are the things that you want, not the things that you need, if that makes sense. Not the things that are really going to build you into the man or woman that you are going to become. And yeah, so during that time, I even got more lost because I was like, wait a second, I'm not happy, even though what I was wishing so hard for and working so hard for, I finally got. And I'm even, I think, more depressed and I'm more lost. And so like that was really tough to reconcile because it's like, wait a second, I'm not supposed to be depressed anymore. I got everything that I was after. And I was even in a lonelier, a little bit darker place. It's hard to like, unless you've lived it, I feel like it's hard to describe. But I think in that point is when I really, and obviously meeting my now wife, it's like that's when the most growth that I've ever had, where I started really reflecting like, okay, well, what is important to me? Like, what do I want to do with this life? Like, who am I really? And I would say that period, like 28 to 32, was very transformative because now I felt the lows and the highs and I wasn't happy with either. So it's like, okay, well, so there was a lot of reflecting during those times. And I'm sure a lot of my friends at that time, they're going to hear this and be surprised about that because from the outside looking in, you know, looked like I was having the time of my life, but no, man, I think I was even in a darker place.
Yeah. If I was one of your friends, more on in that time, 28 to 32.
Yeah.
And I'm on the outside looking in.
Yeah.
Like, what would I have seen in your life? Like, what would it have looked like?
And like I said, I had the penthouse apartment. I had an Audi R8. I was every weekend. I was in New York, Miami, first class, best hotels. Like I was a true moron with financially, but I also don't regret it because first of all, it was a cool experience. And second of all, again, like in your life, you need these certain seasons to really mold you into the person that you're kind of destined to become, I believe. And so, yeah, that's what it would look like. Just like a music video. Like that's probably what my life looked like. And like all the friends that I attracted at the time who were like great people, I love them all, but like they were like kind of party friends, you know, they would go to the club and split a table or whatever friends. So it wasn't like, we never had like deep conversations or anything like that. Yeah, so outside looking in, it's just probably, and I see these guys today on Instagram, you know, like they're in Dubai with the watches and the yacht. And I'm like, oh. But those guys are going to learn just like I did. You know, that's what it would have looked like.
Yeah. You know what you said earlier is actually like, as I was listening, it made me pause. Like it was actually a profound thought. When you're up, the things that you attract, it's what you want. It's not what you need.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of the time, we just think about, let me give an example. You mentioned that you were in your mom's basement for a period of time. I wasn't in the basement. I was in the guest room. My mom's house.
A little step up now.
Maybe like half a step up from the basement. But like, we always think about, I think it always resonates deeply with me, those moments, because I felt like I was getting really tested.
Oh yeah.
My resolve, my commitment to this ambition, like building this show, felt like it was being tested at every seam. But we don't actually think that much about what about when you got all the things you think you wanted. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, I want to understand where that profound thought to realization came from? Because I think that's going to be a moment for someone of like, things are looking up, you're getting everything you want, but it's just that, it's what you want, it's not what you need. Like, what was the moment for you when you realized that in your life?
Let me try to articulate this, because the things that I wanted because I wanted to impress other people. It wasn't that I wanted because it was going to add some sort of value to my life. Like, all the value that these things that I wanted at the time were really just to kind of flex on other people, because I was so insecure, right? And so I think that's sort of the foundation of this idea, where it was like, all these things are actually adding more problems, because they're attracting people to my life that are probably not in it. They're not in it like for me. They're not in it for the right reasons. And again, it's just like, yeah, they just cause more headache. Okay, now the property tax is higher. Now, like, there's just more bills, or more, like, again, everything was just to the flex. And then you come to this realization, oh, wait a second, nobody actually gives a shit about me. And I always say this to people in like a nice, decent way. Like, nobody gives really a shit about us or our story or anybody else's. It's like people are kind of inherently selfish, but not in a bad way, where they're thinking about themselves. So if they see somebody else's success, it just makes them maybe feel a little bit more ambitious. Or if you're like in the comparison trap, it might make you feel bad about yourself. Or if you see somebody else doing bad, you're actually like, well, at least I'm not them. It all relates back to how you feel in a way. And so I thought I was going to be the man with all this stuff, and all the people who doubted me were going to come back like, oh shit, you're actually, nobody cared, man. You know? And so that's another thing you realize, and my mind is going to different places, so not to really digress, but like, another thing I realized why I love telling stories is like, nobody really cares about my story or your story or anybody's story unless they can see themselves in that story. And so this can go to the later conversation when we're talking about like growing an account and storytelling and making content. But it's like, if yeah, man, like I went into that different direction, but if people can see themselves in your story, that's when they really start caring about you. And anyways, I went 3 different directions, but the foundation of that thought is all the stuff that I wanted was only for the appearance that I thought it may present to other people. And it came from a place of insecurity, you know? So now the things that I want is like stuff that's going to bring me and my family value, comfort, peace. And we can go into that now, but like what I'm trying to build now is completely different than what it may have looked like 10 years ago, and which is a beautiful home, a house full of love, you know, like it's so different now, where it's like a departure from like the material desire to the more like spiritual or
like fulfillment,
like what truly is fulfilling to me, like truly natural dopamine, if that makes sense. And a lot of this stuff is stuff you can't buy. It's really stuff that you just have to, like I said, like my most important thing now is to build a loving household and a comfortable house for my daughter and like other kids that we may have in the future. Like, that's everything to me. So now I look at life through that lens. When I'm looking at anything, whether it's like what kind of business I want to build or what I want to do, it's like, that's the North Star. It's like, how is this going to secure a better future for my daughter, or a more loving household for my family, that kind of stuff. And I think that's just growth, man. That's just going through the ups and the downs of life, you know, and you start like developing new frameworks.
You know what? So you're 32 years old. You're kind of living almost like this kind of, I don't know, playboy, larger than life lifestyle.
Yeah. Playboy life is good. Yeah. Shout out to Mo and Fozy and all my friends at the time. That was a good time.
I guess what caused the shift? What made you switch it up? Like, even when you say that was actually the moment that you were the most lost, which to everyone else, that was like an onlooker or saw you at the club or saw your car, they'd be like, this is when he's most up. Mm-hmm. But to you, and you reflect on it, it's the period that you were the most lost. What caused you to shift out of that?
I think it was just like really deep reflection on that. It's like, wait a second. And it was actually this Naval quote, you know, Naval.
Yeah.
And he had a quote. It's like, I forget exactly what it is, so I'm paraphrasing, but it's basically like, the true measure of success is if you're truly like fulfilled or happy, or maybe it was something like, if you're so smart, why are you depressed? Or something like that. And then I realized, like, yeah, man, I'm living life wrong. Like, I'm living life for other people, outward appearances, or I'm living life the way that I thought it was supposed to be lived. Oh, this guy just built that company startup. He exited. Okay, I got to build apps. And then I realized, no, I got to live this on my terms, man. I got like such a unique set of skills and and a unique upbringing. Like I'm my own person, just like everybody else is, and so like I started really reflecting. And I remember I moved out to Los Angeles at that time because I was living in D.C. When I say D.C., it's Northern Virginia, but I say D.C. because it's like a little bit easier to locate on a map.
Yeah.
But I went out to L.A. and I kind of knew I had a different foundation and framework of like what I wanted to do. I wanted to pursue. I only wanted to make money if it was something I was interested in. So like that was the primary thing. It's like Zach Pograb, he had a quote that I really love because I inherently live this. I was just never able to articulate it. But he said, excitement is a compass. And so I started doing the things that were like really excited me, and I knew what kind of partner I wanted to attract. And yeah, man, just like older, a little bit more wise, I knew exactly not exactly, but I had a better idea of what I wanted out of my life. And when I went to LA, I think the last 6-7 years since, I've kind of achieved that in a way. Like I stayed true to that North Star and I stayed true to that foundation. And yeah, man, I would say like for the first time in my life, I'm really like happy, fulfilled. Like I have a direction. I'm excited for the next 40 years. I know exactly kind of what I want out of life. And that hadn't existed the first half, like the last, 39 years. I've never had this until now. So that's why I say I'm like a bit of a late bloomer. I feel like I'm starting my life right now and I have all the energy and excitement and passion in the world. And it took a long time to get here. And so if you're out there and you're in your mid-20s, 30s, even 40s, 50s, like it's never too late to reinvent yourself, and it's never too late to get after the life that you deserve and that you want. And I hope to kind of embody that, because I do feel like I literally feel like down in my core, I'm just getting started. Like life has started for me at 39 years old. And,
that's a beautiful perspective. Yeah. When people talk about depression, and you mentioned actually at 32, that's probably when you felt like you were at the peak of, like you were depressed. I don't think I've ever experienced depression personally. I think maybe the closest that I got was 4 years ago. I've just moved to America, and this is in 2019. It takes me 6 months to get on the job market. It was like such a tough thing. So I had no connections here. My university was not respected here either. But I get this job in consulting at a good consulting firm, and then COVID hits, everything locked down. And like at the time, none of these companies knew how to train graduates in a remote environment.
Yeah.
Their whole training schedule was like, just sit next to this guy that's been doing it for years and then watch him and then you'll get it. And now you're in a remote environment and you don't have that. And I remember I basically didn't really get any training, and I was like useless at the job, completely useless. And it was like, I'd grown up as a high achiever, like someone that does well in school, goes to like one of the best universities, does well at university, gets like, that was my whole psyche. Identity, self-worth was based off being of value. And now I'm in this environment. I remember I had this new manager at the time, and she would just keep telling me how I just was behind, that they would expect someone that's been at the company 6 months to have been at this level. And I remember there was one day when I woke up. Sometimes you wake up, you feel tired. This was tired, but it was like different kind of tired. Felt like a stone. Like literally, I felt heavy getting out of the bed. Like every action felt like there was something on me. And it was only when I left that job, I remember I handed out my resignation, and it was like, I was in Atlanta actually at the time. To build up the courage to go to leave, I'd had to go on like a 1 or 2 week vacation. And I remember when I told them I was leaving, after I ended the call, I like jumped for joy. That's like a phrase, right? Like you jump for joy. I actually genuinely jumped for joy. But I think that was the closest, that feeling of just feeling heavy, like waking up and feeling like you haven't slept for a second. I think that was like the closest feeling that I got to depression. I'm curious from your vantage point, when you say that like you felt at that moment you were the most depressed, what was the feeling?
So for me, I can only speak like from anecdotes, right? Like personal experience. And maybe I'll say like some controversial stuff now. Could be good. Get some people talking shit in the comments. when I say depressed, I think it was very situational. I don't think it was necessarily chemical. And when I say anxiety, that was anxiety. It's worse than I could ever describe. Like, especially DPDR, when it's like derealization, depersonalization. Like, I was on a wall watching myself. Like, it was very it was very physical manifestation of that. Like, that was, we could do a whole other pod on that one day for hours of what I experienced. And that was like really, really bad. The depression side, I think it was situational. Again, I think it was not real, true clinical depression. And the controversial side, I think most people who suffer from depression aren't actually depressed. It's like, and I come from a point of love and from experience. I would use that as a way to like, sort of like pimp, like, how do I even describe? Like, I would use that as a way to make myself feel better. Oh, I'm not doing this because I'm depressed. Or I'm playing these 6 hours of Modern Warfare 2 in 2009 because I'm depressed. It was like a way to like assuage the situation a little bit. And like, I do feel like when I'm talking to young men, especially now, and they say I suffer from depression, I'm like, it's like most of the time I don't believe it now, but it's a self-reflection because there is clinical depression. I think the science is it's pretty much there, but I do feel like a lot of the time it's a story that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better about our current situation. And I say this too because one of the most profound and impactful things in my life, and this is going to sound crazy, this is like when I was like 32, 33, and I finally it was David Goggins, right? And he said, I forget he was saying on a podcast, he was like, just look in the mirror, or like you look in the mirror and you're going to see a bitch or something like that. And bro, this was something maybe people can practice. A lot of people may flame me and say this sounds crazy, but I just remember looking in the mirror one day and I'm like, you're just a bitch. Like, I'm sorry. That's what it was. And like that very framework alone, whether it was placebo or not, it helped me get out of so many situations where I realized I'm thinking like, oh, I'm like too depressed no, like, just, I'm sorry, you're not. And like, just that framework alone, that way of thinking, that little mental shift, the mental model helped a lot. And that's when I realized, okay, this wasn't actually depression. This was a story that I was telling myself because I was so down and I was in this comparison trap and I'm comparing myself to everybody out there on Instagram and all my friends and everybody else. And like, oh, I'm just depressed. Nah, it was a story I told myself. It didn't actually exist. The anxiety component, yes, but the depression component, chemically, I don't believe it was there. I think it was situational, and I think it was a justification that my mind developed, if that makes sense. So again, that could be controversial, but I see that in a lot of other people too. When I talk to them, some people in my life, I won't name them obviously to keep their privacy, but I'm like, dude, you're not depressed. You're not depressed. You're just down. You're just down, and you got nothing going on right now, but you're not depressed. So let me know, if that's controversial, but that's how I feel about kind of like the mental health epidemic happening today. It's really more of a comparison epidemic manifested through social media.
A comparison epidemic. You know what? You said this actually in that tweet. You said, no one will ever believe in you as much as you need to believe in yourself. If you're facing a tough situation in life, you can play victim, you can cry, yell, kick and scream, or you can do something about it.
Correct.
And I believe that if you have an able mind and body and you have access to the internet, there are no excuses.
None.
You have everything you need.
Zero. Yeah, 100%. That tweet, I'm talking to my younger self a little bit more. So I made this video that went kind of viral on Instagram. It's pinned on my page right now where I'm talking to my younger self. And that's what I tell him. I say, listen, you're not going to like to hear this, but nobody's coming to save you. And that's one of my favorite quotes in life because it is just so true. If you're down, if you're in the basement like I was, just bumming around for 3 years, feeling bad about yourself, cool, that sucks because nobody else is ever going to give a shit. Even like your parents who may love you and support you, your best friends, it's like they still got their own life and their own stuff happening, man. They're not going to baby you and hold your hands through this shit. And so it's like, that's one of my favorite quotes. Nobody's coming to save you. And I think I alluded to that in the tweet because I'm talking to my younger self. And now I'm of the framework that if you have, man, if you're physically able, if you have a healthy mind and a healthy body, and nowadays with modern access to the internet, like there's literally nothing else you need. There's no excuses. And the only excuses are justifications that you create out of thin air in your head to absolve yourself from your current situation. And I really believe in that. And for some people that's harsh, but that harshness is actually what I needed to become the person I am today. And so I'm a big believer that tough love is true love. So now people in my life, by the way, my friend Jamal Smith, Smalls, shout out to you. I was gaining weight, and I love having friends like this in my life. He says, bro, you're looking fat as shit. I was like, you're an embarrassment to me. And I was like, that's why I love you. Tough love is true love, and I'm a big believer in that.
Just like the reality, the cold, hard reality.
The worst you can do for somebody if you really love them is like, nah, it's okay. Everything, like, no. Tell them what they need to hear. That's true love to me, man. That'll go a lot further than just like being that voice. Nah, everything's cool. Don't worry about it. You know?
Like when I hear your story, it kind of feels to me almost like a redemption story. And here's what I mean. I think a lot of times in those sorts of stories, chapter 2 is actually better than chapter 1. And so chapter 1, and you let me know if I'm correct in this, it's like you're motivated by this chip on your shoulder. You even mentioned like being an immigrant, like coming from an immigrant background, the chip on the shoulder of people discounting you or thinking that you're not going to be anything.
Yeah.
And that motivates you to this certain level of success. You build this app to millions in revenue, they get a couple of million from it. And now it's like everything you said was correct. Like the chip on the shoulder, it all worked out. And it's almost like you get drunk off of that feeling, that ego boost, that all of that validation. And it's almost like you crash the car,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like it crashes again.
Yeah.
And actually the rock bottom of that crash is deeper than even when you were in the beginning.
Correct. Yeah.
That's the first chapter. And then in the second chapter, it's like now you're armed with all of the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience from what happened in chapter 1, you can now build this new peak. And so before we get into the social media stuff and how people can grow a page from zero themselves to hundreds of thousands of followers, like you've done, I'm curious, what was that? Earlier on, you said you were lost. What was that first moment in chapter 2 when you felt found? Where you felt like the momentum had switched, like you was gently just starting to go in your direction. Like, what was that first moment in your mind?
I got to tell you, man, I love this quote. I forget who said it, or maybe it's just like a popular adage, but ego always comes before the fall. And I remember I would always craft these identities for myself. Identity is a very dangerous thing to play with. And so my first identity was just like this loser bum, blah, blah, blah. And then the second one was like, oh, now I'm like a tech guy and I have money and I'm like a cool guy. And that was like the second identity that I found for myself. And that was very dangerous because now I have to maintain that. Right now, like this is like this mirage that I have to maintain. That's just like a dangerous path to go down. And I think almost a losing formula 9 times out of 10, right? And so I got to say, man, I got to attribute a lot of this to my now wife. When I met my wife at the time, 2017, and I just gotten out of like 2 really turbulent, like bad relationships, right? No point of going deep into those on this pod. But like meeting my wife was such a profound experience, man. She really she reshaped me. She like helped me think about the world differently. She brought like a lot of faith into my life, which was always absent sort of in my life, even though I grew up like my mom was Catholic, all that. It's just been so beautiful, like getting to know her and like becoming her husband, and now having a daughter, which is like my entire neurochemistry has been like reshifted and rebalanced. It's been really awesome, but I do have to attribute it a lot to her. And it was like the first time kind of like I found home in my life, if that makes sense. It was just like very comfortably, and always like these conversations and the way that we see the world and speak about things that allowed me to like look into myself in a way that I never had. But it was definitely a lot the move to LA, being around like this new community of like creative energy. It was a lot going on. It was like a cocktail of so many different ingredients coming together in that time. And a lot of that was deliberate. Like I completely changed my environment. I almost like started from scratch. And that was a really profound time, man. And I owe it all to that. So a couple things that people can take from that. If you're sometimes it's all about just leaving physically the location that you're in. I'm not just coming from a place of experience. All my closest friends and family, it's like we all agree the most profound change of our life came from when we just got up and left to a completely new location with completely new goals and almost like this reinvention period. So again, another word vomit. A lot of words to just say I changed physically, mentally, and I just sort of reinvented myself.
Yeah, reinvention period. I love that. You know what? Can you take us deeper into that that experience with meeting your wife? I'm curious, like where were you at? What was the location? What was the time? What was the setting of like that moment where you felt like this is special, like this is something that I haven't experienced before?
Yeah, man. First of all, no shame in my game. I slid into the DM. That's how I met my wife. I should probably just lie and tell a more romantic story. Yeah, man. To be honest, when I first met her, she looked like the very typical like LA girl. We were both living in West Hollywood, and I was like, all right, she's just probably trouble, but whatever. But then like I just fell in love with her soul and the way that she thought, man. And I think the way that she reminded me of home was she had the East Coast roots. She's from Charlotte, where we live now, hence the move back to Charlotte. We had a lot of the same sort of ideology and philosophy and like similar worldviews. And I just never had conversations like that with a woman before, you know, and not a reflection on, that's a reflection on me because I was just so shallow and so whatever when I was younger. And now I'm finally like, wow, this is very fulfilling and very different and very interesting. And it molded me into the person I am today. I'm completely different than I was 8 years ago, bro. Completely different. And a lot of that has to do with her. But I think that was just, it was just something I never experienced before, never realized existed until I met her. And that was really beautiful to me. So,
you know, that's actually kind of like I think that's a crazy experience for, it's almost like a profound experience for men, because a lot of the times with women, especially in the initial stages, and I've definitely gone through this, like, if we're being honest, like we're motivated by sex, usually in the beginning.
Bro. 100%.
It's very rare that you'd be like, a conversation that we had.
I think that's
never
the entire
had a
history
conversation
of the world, bro. Like the most formative wars on this planet were started because of a woman, whether it be a king or a conqueror, jealous or envious or whatever it may be, trying to win their love. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole, man. I 100% agree.
Do you even remember the first conversation? Not the first one, but the first one where you were like, this is just different.
Yeah, it was at Otis and Penelope in West Hollywood, which was our first date. That restaurant has since closed, man, which sucks. It was so good. But Otis and Penelope, and I just remember, you know, being a couple old fashions in and just talking about things that I never thought I'd talk about to, especially on a first date. A lot of it was like ideology based, right? And I'd never spoken about my worldview and ideology and like how I view things almost with anybody to that point at the time, let alone like a woman I was interested in dating. So to a lot of people listening, it's like, that's all I talk about or whatever. But for me, it was very vapid and very shallow and, you know, before that. And so that was transformative.
Did you know then that would be your wife?
Almost, bro. Yeah, I really kind of do. I really kind of do. And throughout my life, especially just recently, like I know now, like I want that. And I'm gonna get it. Not in like that sound a little bit off, but it's like, yes, like the feeling, almost like the intuition is very important to me now. That initial instinct. But yeah, I kind of knew, man, and she kind of knew as well, which was interesting. It was sort of like a love at first, maybe not sight, because I'm sure she saw me and she was like, but a love at first conversation. Yeah.
You know what? It's I think the best things, it's like we're pulled towards it. Like you can't even, maybe it was Zach that said this as well, Zach Pogrub. Or maybe I just had the thought. It's like the best things, you can't even explain it. Like it's hard to even give a logical, like if you're going to explain it to someone, you can't even give a logical explanation.
Yeah.
You just felt it. Just like I call it like gut instinct for me. Like it's just something you were pulled towards it. You were drawn in.
Well, that's what I love. You know, like the auteurs, you know, like the great film directors of our time. I come from a world of software and products. So I built software for 10 years. So it was all data driven. Like there was never anything, and now in content is very much like a gut instinct, sort of like these auteurs where it's like how they feel about something. There's no data, there's no analytics that come into play. But from the world I came from, everything was software. Okay, we had 72 taps on this button versus this button, so that means we got to implement this. Or whatever. You know, like software is like purely analytical. And now I'm in this world where like I don't even know what I consider myself now, like the creator, content maker, filmmaker, whatever it might be. And now it's pure instinct, and that's been really beautiful. And so I agree with you, and I also want to shout out Zach again because I've lived so many of his quotes without like he has a way to articulate things that I've felt. And so that's definitely one of them, man. Like I completely agree with that.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And Zach is so good at it. Okay, I want to get deeper into the content creation.
Oh yeah.
And you know what's funny? I texted you last night. I was like, I saw something on YouTube where I think it was on the thumbnail of a video, and it said you had gotten 400,000 followers in 100 days. And I remember I pick up my iPhone, I like open the messages, I text you, I'm like, is this true? And you're like, yeah, I got 400,000 followers
across platforms, not
in TikTok and Instagram.
Correct.
And so there was something that you had said online. You go, I've grown over 10 pages to a cumulative 10 million plus followers on Instagram. Most recently, I grew my personal page by over 400,000 followers in the last 18 months. So that's just Instagram.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of views. It's year 2 of being a full-time creator, and I'm on track to pull in over $500,000 this year through brand deals, products, and speaking engagements. And so you go on to kind of list some of the ways that people can start growing a following on Instagram. But here's where I want to begin. I think even in your content, you kind of speak about it of being like, you've been doing this for 2 years. And so for the person that's right at the beginning, maybe they haven't even posted a video. They do not think about themselves as a content creator. Like even recreationally, they're not doing TikTok dances with their friends. Like they do not think about themselves as a content creator. If you were almost going to give them a masterclass, what would you say is step 1?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I've been doing this now a little under 2 years, but for my as a personal sort of personality. And it's a little misleading because I've kind of been doing it for over a decade now because I was the guy, you know, like for all my apps and businesses and brands prior, I would build these pages, and that was predominantly our customer acquisition strategy. And it came from like the early arbitrage days. And that's when I really started realizing the power of content. So in the last 2 years, it's really just been me as a personality and as I hate the term, but it's building my personal brand. I wish my biggest regret now, I wish I started that 15 years ago because it's 100 times more impactful than any faceless, any media, sort of brand pages, that kind of thing. So right now I would actually give like pretty tactical advice to somebody considering starting or wanting to build a personal brand, or some sort of presence online, which I cannot recommend this enough. I think it's the golden age to do this. The amount of opportunity that it's brought to me, like it's endless. Like my email inbound it just never ends. Like whether it be brand partnerships, speaking opportunities, people looking for a co-founder, like it just goes on and on and on. And just having that built-in audience is great because now we're building products. Like we have I still have products available even though I sold my last company. I still have a few apps like Tone Studio that I do with a couple. Jack Morris and Gypsy Lush, shout out to you guys, 2 of Instagram's biggest influencers. I have Cinelite, and I have this new one coming out called Pulse. The great thing about having an audience is I already have like a consumer base. There's no marketing that needs to be done. I'll just make a video about it, or put it on my story, send a tweet, send it to my email newsletter, whatever, and all of a sudden I have 500 customers. And I can learn from them and take their feedback and tweak it and learn and grow and keep shipping. And like it just makes life a lot easier. So if you wanted to grow an audience, the first thing I would do is I should have thought this a little bit because there's a lot of first steps. The first thing I would do is figure out what your objective is. And I think you got to be honest with yourself. I don't think there's a wrong answer. I just think it needs to be the right answer for you. So do you have a SaaS or do you have a product? Do you have just something to sell? And you want to build an audience to sell this product or service to those people. Maybe it's you just want to learn how to how to develop a presence in front of the camera, learn how to use a camera and editing software. Maybe it's just pure learning. You just want to see how far you can take it. Maybe it's a creative itch that you want to scratch and you want to tell stories. And that's, I think every human has an inherent desire to express oneself. And it's like, that's the medium that you're choosing to express oneself. Like whatever the reason is, just be honest to yourself about that, because you sort of have to have a North Star. If you just start making content aimlessly, it's going to set you back a few years. Once you've determined that, you got to really figure out like where your interests lie. Because I see a lot of people, that's just popping, that trend's popping, I'm going to make content about that. And all of a sudden you're a prisoner either to that trend, or you're going to burn out because you're doing something that you don't really enjoy in the first place. And it's a long and brutal game, y'all. Unless you're like a diamond in the rough, you're going to be shit at first, and it's going to take you a long time. So you have to be equipped with that knowledge. This is a 1, 2, 5 year process. I'm just going to try to get a little bit better over time, over a long period of time. And then what I think, again, maybe it's audio, maybe it's written, maybe it's podcast, maybe it's visual, whatever it may be. I'm going to recommend to do short form video at first. So you're somebody with no skills, no knowledge. You just want to get into content. Take on short form video first. And all you need, if you have an iPhone, you got all the equipment you need. Like there's no excuse really. The reason why I'm going to choose short form is because every platform right now is prioritizing it in their discovery engines. So Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. Those 7 platforms, I would say probably the 7 big ones. Even Threads now to an extent, they're all prioritizing short form video content because that's where the demand is. So they need to satiate that demand with a never ending supply of short form video. And the discovery algorithms are weighted heavier now towards short form video, I think, on all these platforms than at any other time in history. So what you can do is you can take the same piece of short form and I forgot about YouTube Shorts. So the same piece of short form, and you can repurpose it across 9 different platforms. Now, when you get a little bit more advanced, the repurposing requires some different things. Maybe it's length, maybe it's hooks, maybe it's the way you package it, maybe it's captions, cover story, whatever it may be. But at the beginning, you can just copy and paste to 9 different platforms just as is, with the same caption, the same everything. And eventually, maybe 50 videos, 100, 200, whatever it may be, you're going to start finding some traction. And it's going to differ across different platforms, but that'll allow you to choose which platform is kind of like your HQ. If your content is more suited for YouTube Shorts, the algorithm is going to let you know. All of a sudden you have, 926 subscribers on YouTube. Okay, I'm going to go all in on this. So that's what I'm going to recommend first. Short form video around a topic that you're interested in. And beyond that, then you got to look for the format. Eventually you want to crack a unique format, because I always say the format is the formula. And so like what sets creators apart is having that unique format, obviously unique to them. If you're going to go out and copy somebody that works at the beginning, but eventually you're always going to be number 2 to that person. Like I met Daniel Mack this last week in San Francisco, the what do you do for a living guy. If you're going to go out and do street interviews, what do you do for a living? You're always going to be number 2 to Daniel Mack. It doesn't, so you always got to come up with your own unique formula. What I recommend, I think a lot of like these so-called gurus and stuff probably wouldn't recommend this, but I would recommend figure out what you're interested in. Go look at the archetype, like maybe 5 to 10 creators that inspire you. We were talking about people that inspired us early, and go copy exactly what they do. Like literally. That may be controversial. Go copy them, because what that's going to do, first of all, they've proven that format formula strategy works. So it'll probably start like, building your audience little by little, but you're also going to learn just by copying. You're going to learn how to edit. You're going to learn how to tell a story. You're going to learn how to, have a presence on camera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And once you start growing a little bit, then you're equipped with like sort of the skills and abilities to kind of start crafting. Like think about like your early content as like wet clay. And as you improve, you're like crafting it a little bit, right? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh shit, I just like developed kind of like a signature thing. I'm putting the caption here, or I'm telling the story this way, I'm using this particular inflection on the word. That's kind of unique to me. I'm going to keep leaning into that. And over time, little by little, you're actually developing your own identity. And like you become your own person, your own creator, and you start learning the game, what works, how to resonate with an audience, how to communicate, how to build, like so many things. And like, and so before I get like too deep into it, it's like just starting really, it's that simple. Like you want to make content, you just start and you're going to suck. But little by little, you're going to learn and you're going to grow. And if you, maybe it'll be helpful if you have like more specific questions, but that's sort of like the overarching short form, copy something that works, little by little, grow, learn over time. And after a long period of time, you're going to look back 2 years later and you're going to say, holy shit, I've come such a long way. And like, I'm my own sort of like creator now. And I have this audience that looks up to me for me. and like, this is great. I'm going to keep compounding on this, and you'll be amazed at how fast it can happen once you finally overcome the mental hurdles and just start.
Yeah, you know what? Let's get more specific, and I want to go
Yeah.
back and forth with you on this. I think this is going to be good for people. And I'm glad that you started with like, what's your objective? Because really, a lot of what you explained in that early phase, I actually think it's really like mindset. It's like, what's your mindset going into this? And you let me know if you've heard this on your side, but I know for people when they speak with me, I went a completely other direction, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that objectively what you're saying is correct. Short form is the best way to start and go about it. I just knew that long form podcast conversation.
If you know, and that's beautiful. Yeah.
But something I hear a lot is I'll speak with people and they want to do short form, and maybe they even have an idea of what the content will be about, but there is no video released. I find this to be the most frustrating conversation I have. Like, they just don't publish. It's like the idea is just sitting with them.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like almost a form of procrastination. But they have this idea, maybe they even have channels that they like, and there's like, they just don't want to publish, whether it's, and I don't know, because this is what I had in the beginning. I was terrified of what other people were going to think.
I was just going to say that. And I think that's 95% of the time that's the case. That is the ultimate mental hurdle that people need to jump over. And it's so difficult, and I get it, and I can relate, and everybody has it at the beginning. You're terrified of you're scared of failing. And the fear of failure, what it really is the fear of what other people, of what you suspect other people may be thinking about you if you're perceived as failing, if that makes sense, right? And so it's this whole thing, because it's so backwards, because then you grow up a little bit and you experience life and you realize the only true failure is never even trying, never even starting. And so you're scared of failure because of what other people may think. And then, as we talked about earlier, you realize nobody's actually thinking about you, nor do they give a shit. It's like, it's a spotlight effect. You're the only one thinking about it. And then 3-4 years go by and you never give it a shot because of what other people may think. And you realize, wait a second, the only true failure is never starting. So I failed. Like, you're going into the same trap you're trying to avoid. It's such an interesting thing, but it's hard to reconcile, man. And I get why it's so tough to jump over that hurdle. But 95, probably even 99, honestly, % of the time, people don't start because they're scared of how they may be perceived if it doesn't go to plan, or if they're shitty at the beginning. And it's like, dude, you're going to be shit at the beginning, you know?
You know what's funny? I remember one creator put it like this, and it was funny to me. Maybe because I was actually experiencing it at the time. In the beginning, when you're like kind of shit and no one watches the content, it doesn't even matter if you fail. Like, no one watched it. Like, there's no views. No one saw it.
100%, man. And another good framework is like, if there is somebody out there in their friend group oh my God, did you see what Kevin he's trying? That's a reflection on them and not you. That's like literally a manifestation of insecurity. If somebody's hating on somebody else trying something, they may as well put a sign that says insecure on their forehead. 100 times out of 100, that's a manifestation of insecurity or fear or a reflection of their own self. And like, yeah, man, here's another helpful framework. Go to any of your favorite creators, scroll all the way back to the beginning and look at their initial content. And that's going to make you feel a lot better, because everybody's going to start the same way you do. Complete garbage. That's a strong word. No idea what they're doing. Like, it always starts like that, man. It's always rough at the beginning, no matter who you are. And so the longer you wait to get started, the more of a disservice you're doing to yourself.
You know what the crazy thing is? The people that are the best at this, it's like this weird sadistic thing. I feel like when I see them, they almost get excited in the failure. Like, it's bombing, like objectively bombing, but they love it. Because you've just seen the arc, like you see where it goes from here. You know what? I have an interesting thought experiment, which is, let's say I take your Instagram, your personal Instagram right now, which I think is like 465,000 followers, around that number. Say that, and God forbid, touch wood, say that I take it all the way down to 0.
Yeah.
Right now, this second, 4:38 in the afternoon. But you have all of the knowledge, the skills, everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you're just going to recreate exactly the same page, but maybe you're going to start something new. What what are you doing in almost like those first, I don't know, 30 days? Like your those first 10 videos that go out. Like, just give me what is your mindset? What are you looking for? When are you doubling down? Like, almost lay out to me that first initial period, those first 10 videos, that first 30 days. What are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's going to be a lot different than most people just because I know now, like I've equipped with a lot of these skills and understanding of how the algorithm works and what audiences are looking forward. So I'm just going to, my page went to 0. I'll just start a new one and do the exact same stuff that I've been doing, and it's still going to work. Now, like more general, what I'm doing at the beginning, because I have started like maybe 15 pages, maybe 20, but like I said, 8 of them were like business pages. So there were like app pages a little bit different. It's always the same at the beginning. I am experimenting my ass off. I am trying everything. I am the same exact piece of content I'm repurposing in 8 different ways to present it. So it's like 8 different formats. Okay, one may be a story, one may be a carousel post with a title introductory, one may be a carousel post with like a video context introduction, and then we go into titles, and then we go into like, but I'm trying everything, and then I'm figuring out what the audience wants, what resonates, what's working, and then I just triple tunnel vision into that one thing, and then I go all out. But I never really get married to a format. You always want to experiment over time as a creator. Because like the very moment you stop experimenting and marry to a format, that's the moment your sort of decline starts happening. Because these algorithms change over time. What the audience wants changes over time. When people see something for the 5th time, it's way less interesting than the first time. So you always got to be, kind of like when you're trying to get big, you want to be shocking the muscles. It's the very same thing with content. You want to be shocking your feed. And so at the beginning of any page or any brand or whatever, if I'm going to start fresh for myself, I am experimenting. And that's actually the best time to do it because you don't have an audience that followed you for a specific thing. You just have like a spattering of like random people who may have like come across you. That's the best time to experiment. And there's no better time than today because all these algorithms are so tuned heavy to the discovery, right? And so like, dude, 2018, 2019, I've grown Instagram pages in every era. That was like an impossible era because there was no discovery mechanism. It was like if you didn't have another page or another or like it was basically pay to play. It was like the only way to grow was to pay through like ads or sponsored posts, shout outs, that kind of thing. Now it's easier than ever, man. Like right now, everything's tuned to discovery. The TikTokification of the internet is like fully taken hold and it's here. And so experiment at the beginning with a lot of different formats and ways to tell a story. And that's what I'm doing every time.
Let me come in. So one of the things that you mentioned in the beginning is that almost your advice to someone starting out is that you would actually almost copy or replicate some of your favorite creators. So maybe we can just kind of we can put the pieces together, which is like, so say, I'm trying to think of someone. Say even I see one of your videos and I see the core, like there's always an idea. I think every creator thinks like this, or a successful creator. There's like an idea to a video, which is like the starting point, right? That's like the foundation. Like what's the topic? Yeah. So you would maybe even go to someone's page, see like a viral video. That's the idea. And then when you say you're taking it like 8 different ways, so the same idea, you're doing carousel, IG reel, tweet, like, is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
At the beginning, yeah. Like once you're a little more set, you don't want to like overflow.
Yeah.
No, I mean 100%. And on the copying front, like I would even say, I mean, there's 2 things I think anybody can, especially if you're new and you're trying to figure out what to do. I think there's 2 pieces of advice that I may give that I think anybody can take. One is like become a newscaster. It's a very easy format. And the reason why I say that is if you look at the trends, if you look at the graphs, every year there's like leaps and bounds, like almost like an exponential graph now where more and more people are getting their news synthesized through their favorite creators on social media platforms, generally short form, a lot of long form as well. And so if you want to become a thought leader in your specific set of interests, experiences, whatever it may be, start by explaining to people what's going on. So if you're, and like, I'll give a practical example. If you're in fitness, say you're a fitness coach, it's going to be hard to stand out if you're just doing the same thing as everybody else. But why not jump on GLP-1s, Ozempic, stuff like that? That's super hot. There's a lot of search volume for that. Why not satiate it? So go out there and start making content talking about, hey, this is what's going on now with Ozempic and FDA regulation. These are some other new things going on. This is why it's good for you. This is why it could be bad for you, that kind of stuff. and just start educating your audience. That's the easiest way to grow and build affinity, because there's just you're offering supply to the search volume demand. And so the way that I did it when I grew, again, because I sort of knew the game and I understood and I knew it was going to work just because I've been 10 years in the game, I was like, okay, well, I'm interested in tech. Where in tech is a search volume right now? AI. It's a new paradigm, huge trend. Let me go all in on this. I'm going to be one of the first to really educate a mainstream audience on what's going on, what they need to pay attention to. So that's how I got my start. And that's why those 400,000 followers in like 100 days, that was when like AI search volume was just through the roof. And I was one of the only people, one of the only voices and personalities there providing, supply for that volume. And you can replicate that at any given time. So if whatever you're interested in, if you're interested in plants and botany, go look at what people are searching for. Go look at what the trends are. Go look at what it's, and then educate your audience on what that may be. And that's one of the fastest and easiest ways to grow. I still believe that niching down is the best way to grow. I think a lot of people disagree with this, but I think you want to niche down as much as possible in order to grow. And from there, then you can start branching out and really, your brand starts, it goes into a lot of different places. But newscasting, educate your audience on what's going on a specific trend, and niche down as much as possible. And that will be your engine to growth. And then from there, you can start doing a bunch of other different things.
Yeah. You know what? Just to add also to your point, because I think the advice you give is so good. But I think one of the questions that people have is like, how do I know trends, or how do I even find this thing? So two things come to mind for me. One, I think it's called Google Trends, right? There's a Google thing where you can literally search words and it'll show you like search volume.
Google Trends,
Google Trends. And then the second thing is, I think this is always what I said. I said you should always be I went for the platform where I was a consumer. I listened to a bunch of podcasts and then I did it. Yeah. And so like, if you're someone that's always on Instagram, you'll just have a natural awareness of what, like, you're always seeing the same reel in this niche. Or you're always, like, if you're in the fitness thing, maybe you're always seeing the Ozempic. And it's like, oh yeah, this is trending. Like, it's seamless, it's effortless for you to figure out what's trending because you're the consumer.
I mean, two pieces there. One, like, I didn't come on your show to plug anything, but we're literally building a product to solve that. It's called Pulse.press. And like, because one of the reasons I got successful on social media is I was always one of the first to break a story. If you go look, if there's something really hot that just happened in AI, Twitter is like where it's going to be at first because it's written word. But when it comes to video, I was always one of the first guys. And people are like, how'd you do this? Well, I would have 100 different tabs open always. 25 different subreddits organized by new, organized by rising, RSS feeds, media publications, tweet noti alerts for a lot of Twitter accounts, And so like, we're building a product that consolidates all this. But to your point, it's like, yes, Google Trends is also really helpful. But to your main point, the thing that I love, which is always harder to put into practice, is make the kind of content you wish existed. Mm-hmm. And if you're a consumer of these platforms and your algorithm is going to be tuned to you, it's like, what do you wish you could watch? Or like, what do you want more of? And like, just make that. And 9 times out of 10, that's a lot harder to answer. It's a lot harder in theory than it is in practice. But like, that was such good advice that you just gave, man. Mm-hmm. It's like, you already know as an audience member what you want. And so as a creator, provide that.
Yeah. You know what? I think one of the things I find that creators, I remember I spoke about this with our mutual friend, Kane Calloway, when he came on the show. And
I'll see him tomorrow.
Oh, nice. I love Kane. He's great. But he was kind of breaking down like his almost like storytelling framework, like the framework that he uses in his content. And so I'm curious, let's say that someone's listening and similar to what you described, they've actually taken your advice. Yeah. So they're like, okay, I'm going to do the newscaster thing. Mm-hmm. Next 30 days of real every day, some news story. Yeah. I'm curious, what have you found? Because it's not just that you're finding a story, then you're getting on camera, turning it on and just going. Yeah, right. There's some sort of like thing, framework, way of speaking, way of like organizing your points that you found generates the best results. What is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That would be like step 2. Like step 1, all right, let's go to the basic. Step 2 now. When it comes to content, it's really when it comes to any story, it's really setup, conflict, resolution. You can kind of borrow that and apply it to content. Now, when it comes to content, it sort of evolves where it's like the first thing you want to do to be successful is figure out how to capture attention. And that comes in the form of visual or verbal hook, something that stops the scroll. Then you got to maintain that attention. The way you do that is through storytelling. And then just to skip ahead and then I'll come back, then you have to reward that attention. And that's probably the most important part. Because somebody's going to give you 45 seconds of time. I'm just talking about short form here. Long form is a completely different ballgame. If you're just going to waste their time and not reward that attention at the end, if they're not going to learn something, if they're not going to be inspired, educated, entertained, that's a bad look because they're not going to send it to anybody. They're not going to like it. They're not going to comment. They're not going to save. There's no signals that makes the algorithm happy. And so you're just going to, that piece of content is going to wither away. And so when it comes to storytelling, and one of the things that Callaway does really well, and we always talk about this, it's like you have to introduce the conflict as soon as possible. And that's what's going to make people continue watching. And so if you're like, okay, Callum just said this, and then this happened, and then his guest responded with this, and then Callum responded with this, and then like that, there's no story there. And so you got to have like these two separate through lines that interweave in and out of each other through the story. And so like Callaway likes to say, and I like how he describes this. He says it's the dance between the context and the conflict. So sometimes when I'm creating like a script, and it may be just so simple, it's like a lot of the times the amazing new tool just speaks for itself, and people are watching to see what the tool does. Like the quicker you bring in that conflict that interweaves with the context of the story, the better. So as an example, it's like OpenAI just launched GPT-4o, and GPT-4o does this, and also it does this, and also they launched this new feature that's not very interesting. But it's like OpenAI just launched GPT-4o, but Apple is furious. All of a sudden, oh shit. Okay, there's a story. There's some conflict now. Why is Apple furious? Where are you going to go with the story? And then you got to give them the payoff, which is, some sort of substance. No hype, no sensationalism at the beginning. And so in 9 out of 10, maybe 99 out of 100 pieces of content that I make, or Callaway or anybody else who's kind of in this sphere, you're going to realize that some sort of conflict is introduced very, very early. That will keep you watching, that'll pique your curiosity. And that curiosity loop is everything. If you don't make somebody curious, they're not going to continue to watch. And they're not going to give you any of the signals that makes the algorithm happy. And so curiosity loop, interweaving of the context and the conflict, and then some sort of payoff at the end where the audience member says, damn, I feel educated. I'm happy I know this. Or that was entertaining as shit. I laughed, I cried. But there's got to be some sort of payoff. And that's like the perfect short. And it'll reward you with the send, which is the most important, sends per engagement. So if they share with their friends, it's great news. If they save it, that's amazing. Obviously, if they comment and like, those are a little bit less important, but that's really important. And then you get the average view duration, which is also huge. And so like, that's the cocktail, that's the formula. And usually storytelling is what's going to get you to that place. And if you do it in bulk every day, scale it up, compound over time, it's going to work.
Yeah. The practical example you gave is so good. And it's like, just hearing it, what's funny actually living in New York is there's a lot of characters in New York that are just naturally great at this thing.
Yeah.
Like you'll be on the bus sometimes or on the subway and someone's like on the phone talking to their thing. Then she did this. And it's like as soon as you introduce that conflict, it's almost like we're hardwired as humans just to like listen a bit deeper.
Yeah, 100%.
What happened next? Like it's storytelling 101. And I think there's a clear shift from being a reporter, someone who's just telling the news, you're just covering what happened, to mixing in those storytelling elements. Yeah. And that's when you're going to start to have videos that go absolutely insane.
And that's important because there's different things. So like when Apple has or Meta or Google, whoever it is, they have like a conference or they introduce something, whatever. Like one of my strengths is speed. So after every Apple presentation, whether it be WWDC, whatever, I'm always going to be the first one out and it's going to be quality and people are going to say, how'd you do this in 20 minutes? That's just like muscle memory. I'm programmed that way. And so I will hijack the novelty. I'm the first one out. So that video is going to do numbers. Like the last Apple video, I think did 8 million on Instagram, like 2 million on TikTok because I was the first. So that always works. But if you can't be the first, what's going to help you stand out? If 6 hours later, nobody cares when they've seen it already 3 times. So then you got to come in with a unique angle. And And that's when the storytelling chops really come in. So I have like two buckets. It's like one, I'm just going to be the first. I'm going to be faster than everybody, and it's going to be quality, and it's going to go crazy. But if I can't be the first, okay, what direction do I come in from? Apple just launched the iPhone 16. That's not that interesting 8 hours later. But Apple launched the iPhone 16 with something that we haven't seen on any other iPhone that I think might just change audio production forever. Okay, that's a unique angle, and people are going to continue to listen. So, there's a lot of dynamics to this game, especially in short form. Like long form, you give people a little bit more of a chance to breathe and digest, which is awesome. But short form, there's a real art and science behind it that you have to lean into. You know, it's kind of like you got to play the game.
Yeah, I like the way that you said that. Kane explains it like that dance. I almost feel like after this conversation, I'm reading a book on storytelling at the moment. I've read multiple books on storytelling. I'm reading the story selling method right now, and it's like that. I want to study that conflict, the way that because some people are so expert at introducing that conflict, and it's so subtle.
Oh yeah.
But as soon as someone has that feeling of they just want to lean in, they just have to hear, especially in short form. You got them. Job done.
Man. Yeah,
that's it.
And it appears in some of the places you least expected. Like some of the comedians on Instagram. Adam W. He's fucking, to me, he's brilliant.
Adam W.
Adam W. He's like 10 million, and he's like one of the biggest, I think, probably personalities on Instagram. And he's just doing comedy skits. But then when you really study it, you realize like all these story beats almost that are happening underneath it. It's like it's very shrewd, man. It's brilliant. So to your point, what we were talking about earlier, the greats make everything look easy, and storytelling is no different. And so sometimes you listen to somebody ramble for 6 minutes and like it just feels like time went by so quickly. Like, yo, how do they do that? And then you go back and study, and it's like it's very deliberate. And it's not just sometimes words, sometimes it's inflection. It's Casey Neistat is like a god at this, obviously. You know, a 15-minute video feels like 2 minutes. You're like, well, what just happened? And so I'm a student of all this, and I love the art and the science behind content. You know, I do. So.
And you know what? I think one of the biggest misconceptions when you talk about storytelling, people think that like the events that you're reporting or like what you're saying, it has to be phenomenal things. It was a car crash, then the car exploded and he flew out. Like the best storytellers, a lot of the times, the stories they're telling are like the events are mundane.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like boring. Like the events are boring, but they're so good at the art, this dance of storytelling, that it's captivating. One of the things you mentioned, because not only are you prolific in making content, the production, the storytelling, the way everything is done is so expert as well. And obviously you're someone that's deeply into the AI scene. What are some of like the tools, like how does AI come into your process?
Yeah, it's funny because there's no, I would say on the like captioning and coming up with like that makes it to my workflow all the time. But when it comes to like content, when it comes to the visuals, there's no like it's just it's dependent on the piece of content. Like there's no workflow that I'm always copying, pasting or adopting. There's no like it all depends. So as an example, when it came to the one speaking to my younger self, I had to de-age myself. That was done through AI. Right. And so like in that specific piece of content, okay, I'm going to use AI as de-aging.
What was the AI like?
I'd have to find it. It was like this pretty expensive After Effects. I'd have to get back to you on that. But it was like an After Effects plugin.
Yeah.
It was pretty good too. Now it degraded the quality a little bit, right? It couldn't do it at that because I had like the 4K resolution. So then another AI tool that I brought in was called Topaz. Gigapixel, I think, is their photo product, but Topaz Video, which again, it costs like $300, but I just bought it because I'm like, I'll use this a lot in the future. And I was able to upscale the video. And even if you want, you can say your video was shot at 24 FPS and you want to bring it up to 60, you can actually like use AI to film some of those frames in. It's really impressive piece of software. I like everything that Topaz does. So I re-upscaled that video with AI as well. So de-aged it, re-upscaled it with AI. And that video, that was like the workflow then. In a lot of videos, I'm actually using generative fill so I shoot, for a lot of my videos, I actually shoot landscape, even though it's vertical. And the reason why is because I like to do the split screen. So landscape allows me to do that with some breathing room. It just looks a little more aesthetic and a little bit nicer versus like the stretched. If I were to shoot vertical, I'd have to like kind of stretch it up, be really close to the camera. And I just have like, I'm a sucker for like a specific look. But because I shoot landscape, sometimes I need to extend the scene a little bit, and I'll use generative fill to extend the scene so it looks really nice and seamless. So that's another example.
What is generative fill?
So generative fill, I use it on Photoshop. It's powered by their model, which is called Firefly. So basically, I'm sure you've seen it on Reels. Like if I took a picture of this room and I wanted to add another plant above you or like some hanging plants, I would just lasso it, and then I would prompt it hanging green plants. Or if I wanted to put like a lamp next to you here, I could just lasso that in. So when you're looking at it on a video plate, if there's certain scenes in that video where nothing is moving, then it's easy to bring in because then you could just mask it. And so like sometimes I'll dress up the scene or extend the scene, and it's really damn good, bro, because it keeps like it takes the visual, and it may be the colors, maybe the contrast, and maybe the hue, however that visual looks, and it'll keep it consistent. So it looks, again, we were talking about indistinguishable AI. It's like 100% indistinguishable from reality. You don't know if that's actually there or not. So if you ever want to dress up the scene, extend the scene, fill in the scene, use generative fill. And I use that a lot. What I don't do, and where I think a lot of artists hate AI, is because it's like, oh, just one click and it takes no talent. But I do think like the market will eventually decide. And I do think the market's going to reject, if he could even tell at that point, 100% AI generated content in media. So I think of AI as a tool that helps me achieve the final visual that I'm after, not as a tool that replaces the entire creative process. The very same as VFX programs, or even Photoshop. When Photoshop came out, everybody hated it. Oh, this is not real. This isn't real art. It's just drawn by the computer. So I always think of these things as creative tools that fit naturally into the creative process. So I use AI in so many ways. It just all depends on the video, on the project.
Yeah. You know what, if we go back to that person that's just starting out, and maybe they've even done their first 10 videos, they've got a bit of traction, and like they're starting to see a format that's working. They want to go deeper with it. And they also kind of, in a way, they want to be more productive. Like they want to get more from their time, and they want to start embedding AI. Let's say they got $100. Is there a tool that you would recommend they go and almost like look out for, or start to like think about implementing in their system, which you could see would just, even if it's just in the captions or any like
right
something that would just be like a huge value add?
Yeah. What's interesting, because a lot of these tools, there's a lot of conversation around the idea that the incumbents are all going to win. So as an example, you could go out and pay $20 for ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other LLMs, but it's free Meta AI now, right? And so it's like, Adobe's another good example. They came out with Firefly, that generative fill. It's like maybe you go out and pay $20 for one runway, text to video or image to video, but now that's probably just going to come to Adobe Premiere like for free as part of the subscription you already pay for. But to answer your question, I think it really varies. I think there are some tools like, so for example, Runway right now when it comes to text to video or image to video is really unique. So I could feed it a video of you and then animate it into whatever I want. So for a lot of content, especially if you're doing like media stuff, like as an example, I run this page called Metaverse, the second E is the 3. Sometimes I'll use Runway, or I'll use like Midjourney to Runway to animate a particular visual that I'm after to give a specific feeling for that piece of content where stock photo is just not going to cut it. I don't want to go to Unsplash and just get the same photos everybody else. I want something very specific to my vision, and I may use a Midjourney to Runway. That's sort of like my workflow there. But I think it would depend creator to creator, what they're trying to achieve, what kind of content, what the end goal is. I think it's very hard to give sort of a blanket statement because there's like for podcasters, I may recommend like Opus Clip is one. I personally wouldn't recommend it because I think it like the human touch, like if you're trying to be an A-level player, if you're trying to be Callum Johnson, you don't want AI to just spit you out 20 short form clips from a long form and then you go post it. I think it's still kind of like there's like some trust loss. Like it's just not gonna be the highest quality, but like that's an example of what you could use as a podcaster's Opus Clip. You feed it the long form pod, and then it's going to give you 25 short form clips already edited with the captions and everything that their algorithms think will perform well on social. and then you have 25 clips to post throughout the week, and you didn't do any extra work. That's an example of how you could use AI in your workflow as a podcaster. But depends on who you are, what you're trying to do. I can give a million different
It's
examples.
a good point that you make. You know what? Here's where I want to go to end.
We spoke earlier about 400,000 followers in 100 days. I remember we actually had someone come on the show a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
He was a dating coach. I think he was actually using those Meta.
Ray-Ban, Metas, yeah. I got him in the bag. I love him.
Yeah. And he had some videos that he was doing on Instagram, some reels. And I think he got like 600,000 followers in like a month, something insane. But the numbers that you described are crazy. What is even, like, what stage are you at? Like, where is even your head at as your following is taking off to that degree? And then, like, even your mindset, are you like, I'm just going to keep doing this same thing? Or is it almost like a surprise to you? The next one that you post goes viral again? Like, what is just that whole experience to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that you start realizing. There's like several different phases of every creator's sort of come up. And one of the phases is once you start getting these numbers, you realize how vapid and pointless and empty they are. Views don't mean anything. Followers don't mean anything, especially in a world that's been TikTokified. Where like literally on TikTok, follower doesn't matter because nobody's on their follow, everybody's on their For You page. So it's like every video has to re-perform against the algorithm. On Instagram is a lot more important, which I respect about Instagram. It's more of like that, the community component is there. But not every view is made the same. You'll have TikTokers with 10 million followers who are going to make less money than an educational YouTuber with 10,000 subscribers, right? It's like all of this stuff is empty if there's no like objective or business behind it. So what I realized for me, what has actually been most impactful for me is not the amount of views or followers or whatever they get, it's the quality of the view and the follower. It's like my following, there's like Fortune 500 CEOs. They're CMOs of some of the biggest companies in the world. They're the developers and entrepreneurs and founders of a lot of these like AI tools and companies and decision makers at some of these big, and that's actually what's helped me the most. And so how I've done that is that comes through quality. That comes through like that thought leadership. That comes through me spending an extra 3 hours on the sound design, even though people are going to be listening it with like 1 bar of volume, like half brain dead on their bed, like with one eye open. But like that extra love that I put into my content, I think that compounds over time, and I've been able to attract like a quality of audience. So I would rather have 100 views from 100 decision makers, people with influential and economic influence, versus 1 million views of like 14-year-old kids in the Philippines. No offense, still like the Philippines, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like there's an LTV, like coming from the software world, like a lifetime value to a specific follower, and not every view is built the same. And I could go on forever with different examples of this. Over this last weekend at MetaConnect, I saw this where I don't want to name names, but like I was around creators who've got the most views in the world. Every video is a 30, 40, $50 million or 50 million view banger, and nobody knew who they were because this is just like feeding the dopamine brain, like the brain rot. Versus I was also with an educational YouTuber, and she was a celebrity, straight up. Everybody, oh my God, you changed my life. I listen to you all the time. I'm listening to you hours a day. You're going to get so much love, more love from a 2-hour podcast and so much more affinity than a 30-second dancing video where you're just hijacking the latest trend, right? And so that's also, especially new creators, I'm like, do not focus on the views because it doesn't tell the whole story. It's the quality, it's the affinity, and most importantly, the trust that you build with the audience. Trust is everything, especially moving into the AI world. That is the most valuable commodity and something that you can never break because it takes years, if not decades, to build that trust, and it can just be destroyed with one wrong move. And so maybe if you want to end there, I want to implore people to not. You can have 10 million followers on TikTok with 5 million views per video, hijacking the latest trend and, hitting your friend with a water balloon and just some brain rot shit. But where the value is in that quality, that thought leadership, really connecting with your audience on an emotional level. It's hard to measure that. That's the problem. There's no way to measure affinity.
What you speak to is almost like the evolution of a creator. Because I think for a lot of us, and I definitely experienced this. I think I'm actually kind of coming out of this phase now. You definitely, when you're initially getting into it, especially if it's like your face on it,
Yeah.
like it's like a personal thing, you definitely have that stage and that phase where you're so enamored with the views and you're so enamored, the followers are going up and everything. It's like, it's dopamine. It's like
100%.
validation. It's like, oh, they like me.
100%.
Is the feeling. And then I think you start to, and a lot of the times it's when you start to have, also you start thinking about monetization, because the monetization is based really on influence.
Yeah.
It's based on, you said this in an ad and it led to this amount of sales.
100%.
Like which is different from views. That is trust. And, you know, that's really like building authority and credibility with people. I think you've kind of done a masterful job of, your content is still entertaining, but there's something about it. There's like a trust that's being built as well. So it almost has like the virality with the trust. Can you just talk about, how do you think about building trust? Like what is that? Yeah. What is that shift from just making like viral to making...
Well, before I answer that, I want to give it an analogy of what you're talking about, the statistics. Again, coming from the software world, you'd get a lot of people with like, oh, my app has 50 million downloads. Okay, well, let's take a deeper look at how many of those people converted into a subscription. Out of the people who subscribe, what's the retention like? What are the churn numbers like? And all of a sudden now you're telling a completely different story. And so it's the same with content. I have 100 million views. Okay, well, how many people, how many of those were converted into a follow? How many of those followers actually bought something for you, or like, you know, like, and so it's the same thing. But to answer your question with trust, I feel like my audience at least knows two things. One, if I'm going to take a brand deal, and I say no to 99% of brand deals. If I'm going to take a brand deal, it's because I actually love that company or use that product. So I've been lucky that a lot of the brand deals have been like Adobe, Google, Meta, like companies that I use every single day. So like that's been very easy. I will never take a brand deal with a product that I don't truly believe in or don't already love and use. So that's like number one. And then number two, I'm always going to at least, I'm going to put paid partnership, or I'm going to explain how it is a brand deal, how I, so like with AI, it's really important because I'm always talking about different tools. And I want the audience to know it's like, I'm covering this organically because this is the tool that I found that I love. I'm not being paid. I'm not on the board. They're not giving me equity. There's no personal gain for me. And so those two things are really important, is like just the divulging of whether I'm being paid or benefiting or not. And then also, if I am going to be paid or benefit in any way, it's got to be a company that I truly believe in and that I love, that I think will bring the audience value. I think those are like my two big unbreakable rules. And hopefully over time that will compound and, you know, sort of build that trust with the audience.
You know what, here's where I want to end.
Yeah.
We spoke about you know, in your 20s being like completely lost in this lifestyle around drinking, around drug use that was
Chasing
almost like
girls.
chasing girls.
Yeah.
That's always the one. To kind of almost numb that pain or distract.
Yeah. Escapism.
And then at 32, it's like you achieve the thing, or at least you think it's the thing that you want, but it's still the same kind of empty feeling, that depression on the back of it. The person that sits before me today seems very settled, seems very sure of who they are, and also where they're going. And so I'm just curious, like, I don't know, maybe we go back to one of these club nights that you were at when you were 30 years old and you've pulled up in your Audi R8 and the 40-year-old version of you just happens to go into that section and meet the 30-year-old version. And maybe you just find like a quiet room somewhere. I'm curious if you just had a conversation and you had to tell that 30-year-old version of you just one thing. What would it be?
Well, it's funny because I would tell them something with the understanding that's just going to go through one ear, not the other. So when I see like these kids in Dubai with the rollies and doing the thing, I'm like, they got to experience that. There's no like, it's funny, you know, because we have the luxury on this planet of having all these old, wise people who've experienced life, 70, 80, 90 years old. They always give the same advice. And guess what? To a young guy who's just like in the game, who's in his growth stage, who's like, they're not going to listen to that. Right. And so, I guess what I would say is how would I phrase this? Like, one of the things that's different about me now is I don't seek validation from anybody or anything external. Like, I would love to have your respect. I don't seek it, nor do I necessarily desire it. Like, my validation comes from my wife, my child, my family, my best friends, like God. And there's no external validation that I need. Hey, the love, I'll take the same with the hate, right? Like, none of it really matters at the end of the day. It's like my validation comes from a very small group of people. And that's what I would tell that 30-year-old sitting at the club. It's like, you don't have to impress anybody here, you know? It's like, because none of it matters. It's all vapid. It's all empty. It's like the only person you really have to make proud is yourself. And like, you got to go find what that is and who you really are before you can like make yourself proud. You got to really understand who you are. And so that's it, man. It's like, it goes back to having that loving home, that happy home. It's like, as long as my home is happy, as long as my daughter is happy, as long as I'm protecting her and shielding her from the world, as long as my wife's happy, as long as I feel like I'm being a good brother and a good husband and a good friend and all that, that's all that really kind of matters. Everything else is noise. And I do feel like the world is a lie in a sense, right? Like, all these things that we think we're chasing, it's all kind of a lie at the end. It's fun to play the game. But it's more fun to be aligned with like a real deep and never-ending purpose. And I think the man now that I've become I'm not necessarily like on the track, but I'm getting there. I'm like close. And that's a life of ups and downs and experience and, everything in between. And so there's nothing that I could tell that 30-year-old. I think he's got to experience it, and hopefully he finds his way. So be a guide, be a mentor, but ultimately, that young 24-year-old guy, he's got to figure it all out through experience and life experiences. And sorry, I don't have a specific answer.
No,
that's what I would say.
That's perfect. I think that's the perfect end.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. It's really a dream for me that I get to do this. It's surreal that this is what I do full time and every week. So if you enjoy the content, if you enjoyed the conversation, the stories, please hit that subscribe button. It helps us immeasurably with growing the channel, with getting guests, all of those things. So please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.